The summer of 1998. A crisp can of Surge sweats in the sun. Monica and Brandy's duet, The Boy Is Mine, ruled the airwaves. The Chicago Bulls had just clinched their second three-peat of the decade, and President Bill Clinton was...
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Well, he was having a rough year. Meanwhile, Leo DiCaprio fans everywhere were dropping $50 worth of modern-day money to pre-order the Titanic VHS. But, I mean, it has 2 tapes, and you could just watch that whenever you want. But in just a couple of short months, it would be the video game industry making waves. A groundbreaking title was on the horizon, one that would redefine how video games could be perceived and experienced as a medium. This wasn't just another release, it was gaming's first true cinematic blockbuster. That game was Metal Gear Solid. If you asked someone back then about Snake, you'd probably get a variety of answers. For starters, a lot of people would immediately mention Snake, the Nokia phone game. That thing was everywhere, and honestly, it was pretty fun. Holds up pretty well. But if you pressed them about a character named Snake, some might have said, oh yeah, the guy from Escape from New York, Snake Plissken, Kurt Russell, right? And boy, we love Kurt Russell, don't we? Do you think Walt Disney's last words were actually Kurt Russell? They say they were, but I mean, probably not, right? They might have been. For Simpsons fans, Snake Jailbird, the bad boy of Springfield, might come up. If you track down a Canadian, they might mention this guy from Degrassi. I mean, I guess they would. He seemed like kind of a big deal on the wiki, but I don't know, I'm not Canadian. And who knows, maybe someone somewhere would remember Snake from The Karate Kid Part 3. And if none of those options rang a bell, well, too bad. You couldn't just Google it back then. And I don't mean because we didn't have internet on our phones, I mean because Google didn't exist yet. What I'm saying is, back in the mid-90s, almost no one in the West would have said Solid Snake. Sure, Metal Gear existed here, we had those 2 NES games, but they weren't the real Metal Gear games that Japan got. We got Diet Metal Gear and Snake's Revenge. Now, I know, Snake's Revenge sounds like a hell yeah type of game, but it's actually... bad. Certainly didn't do any heavy lifting in turning Solid Snake into a bona fide action hero, that's for sure.
No! That is not Solid Snake!
But that was about to change. The name Snake was on the verge of a transformation.
This is Snake. Colonel, can you hear me?
Like John McClane, Rambo, and even Snake Plissken before him, Solid Snake was about to become a household name. Well, assuming your household had a PlayStation in it. To understand how Metal Gear Solid came to be, let's jump from 1998 back to 1994. Picture a 31-year-old Hideo Kojima in the middle of his own Michael Jordan-esque run with Konami. By this time, he'd directed Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, and Snatcher. That's hit after hit after hit. In 1994, Kojima was wrapping up a 4-year production cycle on what he considered at the time to be his magnum opus, Policenauts. While Kojima was preparing to port Policenauts to the 3DO, Sony released the PlayStation. This would prove to be a very, very big deal for Kojima. The system was leagues ahead of anything he'd worked with before. It didn't just catch his eye, it completely sparked his imagination. Kojima loved the hardware so much that he not only wanted to put Policenauts on it, he wanted to build his next project from the ground up completely for the PlayStation. That, of course, ended up being a new Metal Gear game. His initial idea was actually to make the new Metal Gear tie into Policenauts, so that Policenauts took place much later in the same timeline as the Metal Gear games. But he ended up scrapping that. With the PlayStation's capabilities in mind, Kojima envisioned the new Metal Gear game as a fully 3D stealth experience, something the world had never seen before. This leap to 3D was one of the reasons the game was actually called Metal Gear Solid. First, there's the obvious connection to the protagonist, Solid Snake. Second, solid symbolized the transition from 2D to 3D, meaning physically solid. And the third reason, well, allegedly it's a jab at Square, which was Konami's biggest rival at the time. Apparently, a square is flat, while a cube is solid. So solid beats square. Yeah, that doesn't really make sense to me either, and I can't find the original source where he said that, so it's possible it was a joke or a mistranslation or something, but it kinda does sound like something he'd say, so whatever, I'll live with the mystery, I guess. Production on the game officially began in 1995, and the development team spared no effort. They practiced with SWAT teams, consulted weapons experts, they meticulously researched to ensure the game's details were spot on. Kojima's ambitions quickly began pushing the limits of the PlayStation hardware, something that would become a bit of a recurring theme in his career. His ideas always seemed to outpace the technology available to him. It's still really mind-blowing what they managed to squeeze on a PS1 disc. Well, actually it was 2 PS1 discs. Hey, it's like the Titanic! Despite the team's enthusiasm, there was some hesitation as well. It had been almost a decade since the last Metal Gear game, and in the West, the series was virtually unknown. This uncertainty is another part of why the game isn't called Metal Gear 3, in addition to a final aspect, which we'll talk about a little later. But by the time Metal Gear Solid debuted at E3 1997, all doubts were gone. American audiences lost their minds for this game. It looked like nothing else on the market, and its cinematic approach to storytelling was exciting. In a world where game narratives were kind of an afterthought and often really tropey, Kojima was going for a full-on film experience. This was great news for Kojima, and even better news for Konami. They launched one hell of a promotional campaign for Metal Gear Solid, which included one of the most bizarrely dissonant commercials I've ever seen.
So aren't these tests kind of easy?
Suicide mission.
Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah, back then they really leaned into silliness to sell games in America. I don't know, the Crash Bandicoot effect, I guess.
Oh, for goodness sake. Every time I come here.
The game finally released on September 3rd, 1998 in Japan, and a little over a month later on October 20th in North America. Europe would have to wait until February of the next year. On its release, Metal Gear Solid was actually panned by critics.
What?
No, I'm totally joking. They f***ing loved this game.
That's a good one.
It was met with universal acclaim. Critics hailed it as groundbreaking, with many calling it the best game ever made. Its story-driven gameplay, cinematic presentation, and intricate mechanics were unlike anything else at the time. Of course, not everyone loved every aspect. Some felt that the frequent codec calls disrupted the pacing, while others weren't used to the narrative taking center stage over the gameplay. But honestly, those critiques kind of highlight just how revolutionary Metal Gear Solid was. From the bold storytelling to the meticulous attention to detail, Metal Gear Solid wasn't just a game, it was an event. We're going to look at everything that made Metal Gear Solid such a trailblazer. We're also going to dive into the characters, mechanics, cinematic elements, and themes that not only made it a hit in its day, but has kept people talking about it for nearly 30 years.
It's been a long time, Snake.
So, because the game's mechanics and story are so intertwined, we really have to run down this whole plot before we can go any further. I want to make it clear that we're only talking about Metal Gear Solid 1 and the events of that game. This goes for the entire video and all the analysis. I definitely want to make videos about the other games in the series, so we'll get to that stuff and those plot points later, but as far as we're concerned right now, the only games that exist are Metal Gear Solid 1 and the 2 that came before it. So, Solid Snake is a retired soldier living in Alaska in 2005. He's a bit of a legend. He's living the dream out in Twin Lakes with 50 Huskies training to run the Iditarod. No, seriously, that's actually canon. Anyway, guess who's getting pulled out of retirement?
I just invited you here so we could have a talk.
Invited? That's what you call sending armed soldiers after me?
Sorry if they were a little rough with you.
Classic. His old commander, Roy Campbell, is here specifically to get him back in the game. Turns out his old unit Foxhound has gone rogue, and they've taken over a nuclear disposal facility in Alaska. The rogue Foxhound unit is being led by a man with the same codename as Snake. Liquid. Snake. They've taken hostages and are threatening to launch a nuke unless the government gives them Big Boss's remains. They want this because the army Liquid has at the research facility has been enhanced with gene therapy. Long story short, they think Big Boss's DNA is the key to maximizing the potential of this unit. Now, Big Boss is like the legendary soldier, and he was also Snake's mentor in Foxhound and kind of a father figure. But Big Boss betrayed Snake and all of Foxhound, and Snake had to take him down. Twice. You'd know that if we got the original Metal Gear games in America. Speaking of Big Boss, Liquid's rogue unit starts calling themselves Sons of Big Boss. In addition to Liquid, we got a real fun crew. Revolver Ocelot, Vulcan Raven, Decoy Octopus, Psycho Mantis, and Sniper Wolf. All of them have some connection to Big Boss, except the one that doesn't have any connection at all to Big Boss. But I already made that video. Snake's objective is to rescue the DARPA chief and the president of Armstead, both of whom were touring the plant with the protection of Foxhound that particular day. Snake also needs to confirm if they can launch a nuke. Snake doesn't want to take this mission, but his hands are sort of tied. So, after a quick, not suspicious at all injection from Dr. Naomi Hunter, who's on the mission for medical support, Snake is on his way to Shadow Moses for the mission. Yeah, it's called Shadow Moses. How f***ing cool, right? Oh, and Snake also cuts his long hair before infiltrating, because otherwise he's worried people will mistake him for Liquid. Their resemblance is actually pretty uncanny. That's weird, right? Anyway, after clearing the docks, Snake experiences the first of many long codec sequences in this game. The support team gives Snake a lay of the land and basically just repeats the stuff that we already heard in the briefing, but they knew dum-dums would skip all that, so this is your last chance for context. Here, Snake also meets Mei Ling, the visual and data scientist who designed the codec and the Soliton radar. Snake instantly hits on her.
I just didn't expect a world-class designer of military technology to be so cute.
And I'm no HR professional, but I think you're not supposed to do that immediately when you meet a coworker. Mei Ling really only exists to save your game, otherwise you'll almost never hear from her. Speaking of never hearing from someone, Campbell also tells you about another member of the team, Natasha Romanenko. She'll give you all sorts of information about guns and how nukes are really bad if you call her, or you could just not call her and she doesn't exist at all. So we'll never talk about her again in this video. Finally, Snake will get a message from another old friend assisting with the operation, McDonald Miller, or to Snake, Master Miller. You can call him and he talks about stuff like survival and he sometimes gives insight on combat. His sunglasses are sick, by the way. I really like those sunglasses. Anyway, now that Snake's met or reunited with his entire team, he can commence his mission. After overhearing some guards spout exposition on the way inside, Snake learns that the DARPA chief is being held in the basement. When he gets there, he can even see the chief on his radar. That's how you know it's really him. Nanomachines are in his blood. No way I can think of to fake that. Anyway, Snake makes his way through the air ducts, but first he sees a woman who looks like she might be a single mom who works 2 jobs, also in the cells. Not Snake's problem, though. You know, word around school back in the day was that if you go back and re-enter the air ducts 3 times, you'd eventually see her in her underwear. I wouldn't know anything about that. I'm not the kind of guy to try something like that. Plus, this is a Kojima game. Believe me, there's more opportunities to see her in her underwear. So, Snake does get into the DARPA chief's cell and tells him it's rescue time. But first, you know we're getting some exposition. Snake asks the chief if the terrorists can really launch a nuke, which the answer to that is, hell yeah, and from any location. Guess what? They got a Metal Gear.
Metal Gear. It can't be.
Now, Snake's already pretty familiar with what a Metal Gear is, which honestly does save them both a little time, but even if he didn't, it's a nuclear-equipped walking battle tank. That kinda sums it up. The Metal Gear is a joint project between the government and Arms Tech, and it was supposed to be tested right here at Shadow Moses, but now it's fallen into terrorist hands. The chief says the only way they can launch a nuke is if they have a password from him and Arms Tech's president, Kenneth Baker. The bad news is Psycho Mantis dove into the chief's mind and got his code, and now it's a matter of time until they get Baker's too. But the good news is there's a PAL system designed by Arms Tech as an emergency override. Baker has those keys, and Snake has to find them to stop the attack. Thankfully, the chief says he's just downstairs. How convenient. Almost suspiciously so. Nah. Then the chief starts asking a bunch of stuff about the Pentagon and just in general being weird, and then he just f***ing dies, which gets a huge reaction from Snake.
Dead.
Snake consults Naomi and Campbell and... Wait. Naomi? Campbell? Did Kojima do that on purpose? He's out of his mind for that one. Right, sorry. They're both like super shady about it.
Heart attack. No.
And Snake picks up on it, but I mean, hey, what can he do, right? As he's leaving, he's held up by what seems to be a woman in a soldier's uniform.
Liquid? No, you're not.
Snake roasts her for a minute about her being a rookie, but she says she's a 10-year vet, which is nuts.
You haven't even taken the safety off, rookie.
I told you I'm no rookie.
They're interrupted by some actual soldiers, and the two of you have to fight them off. The whole time you're doing it, though, there's this soldier in the background with his ass up in the air. That's Johnny. He'll be all right. After beating these soldiers, the woman runs away and Snake chases after her, staring at her ass the entire time. But it's okay, it's plot important ass. It's not weird. This is Kojima. Snake is stopped in his tracks by a vision of a few members of Foxhound discussing the accidental killing of the DARPA chief. But wait a minute, we just saw him die. How is that possible? He then sees one of those three men right in front of him, Psycho Mantis. Now, this is the only time you see him with that sick-ass trenchcoat drip, so really soak this scene in. Snake, of course, calls this in. Naomi throws out the word psychometric interference like it means a goddamn thing, and then Snake and everyone else just moves on. So much of this game only moves forward because Snake doesn't have the time to unpack all the lies that are being told to him. So next, Snake heads downstairs to blow up some walls until he finds Kenneth Baker, the Arms Tech president. Now old Kung Fu Kenny has got himself into another jam. He's all wired up to C4. But before Snake can even think about getting him out of this pickle, he gets shot at from around the corner. This is how Snake meets Revolver Ocelot, the 60-year-old Russian cowboy Foxhound has on their payroll. He likes guns a lot.
This is the greatest handgun ever made. The Colt's Single Action Army.
No, I don't think you understand. He really likes guns.
There's nothing like the feeling of slamming a long silver bullet into a well-greased chain.
Okay, you know what you do? You buy yourself a tape recorder, you just record yourself for a whole day. I think I'm gonna be surprised at some of your phrasing.
So now a gun duel with Ocelot serves as our first real boss fight. I say gun duel, but really in execution it plays more like an intense game of Duck Duck Goose with your surprisingly spry grandpa. After beating him, the party will be interrupted by a badass cyborg ninja. He slices off Ocelot's hand and then proceeds to cut down all the C4 wire. Ocelot heads on out, and then after telling Snake that he has no name, so does the ninja. Thankfully, Baker survived, although unfortunately they already have his launch code. Not because of Mantis though, Baker actually has mental insulation. No, instead Baker was pretty savagely tortured by Ocelot. He even broke his arm. But don't worry, Snake has a quick joke to ease the tension.
Looks like you're more than even now. His was sliced off.
You gotta laugh. Strangely, Baker says the DARPA chief should have also had mental shielding from Psycho Mantis. Weird. Snake tells Baker the chief is dead and he has a little bit of a meltdown. He starts saying that Jim lied to him and basically calls Snake a fool when he says it was just a heart attack. But no time for crucial and necessary information. We have to talk about nuclear deterrence over stock footage for about 3 minutes. Baker tells Snake that Metal Gear Rex is the ultimate deterrent. Sure it is, Ken. Baker also shared that his company got to build Metal Gear Rex using the Pentagon's black budget. Now, for a whole bunch of reasons, I'm not going to dive too deep into what the Pentagon's black budget is, but essentially it means Arms Tech got infinity billion dollars to do whatever they wanted to do with absolutely no oversight. Well worth bribing the DARPA chief over, I would say. Which he did. You see, after the Gulf War and that time of, well, somewhat peace, weapons manufacturers were merging and being bought out, etc., etc. Metal Gear was going to save Arms Tech from going under. After this training exercise, Rex was going to be formally adopted by the US military. Well, that is until Liquid and his little crew changed their plans. Baker gives Snake an optical disc he was able to hide from Ocelot somehow. I actually don't want to know where he hid that.
He hid it. In one place he knew he could hide something, his ass.
Anyway, it's the only existing raw data from the Rex exercise. The terrorists don't know about it, and no doubt the fat cats at the Pentagon will want it. Unfortunately though, Baker doesn't have the PAL keys like the chief thought he would. He said he gave it to a female soldier. Huh, female soldier. Snake assumes it has to be Campbell's niece. She was recently transferred to Shadow Moses but refused to participate in Liquid's uprising. Honestly, it's a pretty safe bet because she seems to be one of only 2 women on this entire base. However, famously, Baker can't remember her codec frequency.
Sorry, I forgot. Damn!
However, he does recall that it was on the back of the CD case. Okay. Now, you might think it's on the back of the CD case he just gave you.
Not this time.
It's on the back of the game case. The one that Metal Gear Solid came in. See it right back there? There's Meryl's frequency. You had to learn that from your buddy in school. You couldn't just look that up. So you had to think literally outside of the box to figure out how to do that. And if you rented the game, God help you. Do you know how many Blockbusters got calls in 1998 because people needed to see the back of the box and they didn't have it? Do you even know what a Blockbuster is? And this isn't even like the most fourth wall breaking we're gonna do. We're gonna get to so much more fourth wall breaking. This game is crazy. Anyway, he can't walk, so we're just gonna leave him. That's cool with me, but first Snake wants to know about the cyborg ninja. Baker tells him it's Foxhound's little secret, and suggests he ask Naomi about it. Yeah, I'm absolutely certain she's gonna be straightforward and give me all of the information I need. No surprise, she claims to know nothing, and oh, Baker dies too. Another heart attack, what are the odds? The support crew is like, whoa, this is crazy that keeps happening to you. Well, we don't know anything about this. You better go stop that launch. Whatever. So now we have to call Meryl, and by the way, if you were still stuck on it, it's 140.15. That would actually be hilarious if this was how that got solved for you after all these years. Meryl confirms for Snake that he's getting far from the full story. She tells him that Shadow Moses isn't actually a nuclear disposal facility, it's a civilian base set up by a dummy corporation for arms tech solely to develop Metal Gear. It's a lot. Luckily, she does have one of the PAL keys because...
Women have more hiding places than men.
Yeah, see, that's the exact kind of thing I was worried Baker was doing, my god. She also gives us some info on Hal Emmerich, the designer of Metal Gear Rex, and the man Baker told us to seek out in the event we can't deactivate Rex and have to stop it instead. Now, which do you think we'll end up having to do? Come on. So, after Snake flirts with Meryl a bit, and then talks her through some light PTSD she's having over killing people for the first time, he's off to the nuclear warhead storage building. First, he has to go through a laser room. You can use thermal goggles to get through, or if you want, you can actually use cigarettes. The smoke actually makes the lasers appear. I always thought that was really cool. Not smoking, but being able to use cigarettes for something. With Snake back outside for a second, he gets a call from someone calling themselves Deep Throat. Yeah, that's the name he goes with.
The informant from the Watergate scandal?
I gotta tell you, Watergate wasn't my first thought. I mean, technically, the informant was given that name in reference to the adult film. None of that matters. He warns you about mines and tells you a tank is getting ready to ambush you. I don't know how a tank ambushes anyone. Also, why the f*** are there tanks here? It's a goddamn island. But hey, who cares? We get to fight a tank. Piloted by none other than Vulcan Raven, the member of Foxhound I didn't deem important enough for a solo video. Sorry about that, bud. After a quick, sick-ass backflip from Snake to dodge a f***ing tank shell, he quickly gets to work tossing grenades into the tank's hatch like it was cornhole at a college football tailgate. Once that's done and dusted, Snake makes his way to the building. But we see Raven just fine doing a conference call with Ocelot and another man we assume is the boss, Liquid Snake. Liquid has a real everything is going according to plan ass attitude, which isn't great news. Ocelot's also itching for a rematch while Raven has gained a serious admiration for his attitude in battle. Raven's a freak for real. So now Snake has to move through the warhead storage building without using weapons lest they strike a warhead. On the B2 floor, Snake comes across an obviously electrified floor. Like it's crackling with electricity, couldn't be more electric. Still, Deep Throat calls again to mention it's an electric floor. Remember he calls us here though, I'm gonna come back to this. He does mention that we need to destroy an electrical box using a remote-controlled missile. Where the hell are we going to find such a specific, and I'm assuming rare, piece of... Oh wait, no problem, there was one upstairs. Come back down, shoot the missiles into the box, and then you're able to head to Hal's laboratory. No, not that one. Although we do love Kirby. Why his office is guarded by electrical floors and machine gun cameras, I have no idea. I know he's a hostage now, but like, this was his office before. No way Liquid Snake and his crew installed electrical flooring and gun cameras since the takeover. So that means he already worked in these conditions? This smells like a call to OSHA for sure. Anyway, we get to the hallway outside of the lab and we're met with an incredibly gruesome cutscene. For PS1 standards, this is actually really chilling stuff. Blood is everywhere, multiple dead men, and of course the terrifying noise emanating through the hallway doesn't help. That noise is actually the ninja reciting train stations. After a soldier dies in front of Snake claiming there's a ghost, Snake sees the ninja himself. He just slaughtered these guards with his stealth camo. He's beaten the game already, I guess. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. Snake follows the ninja into the lab to find him scaring the piss out of Dr. Emmerich. No, literally, he pees. Look, Otacon's my boy, but like, I'm sorry man, that's canon. It's not even top 5 worst parts of the Bros canon though. I mean, the dude's really been through it. Anyway, Snake is obviously like, hey man, I could see you're that ninja.
You're that ninja.
Nothing gets past Snake. Meanwhile, the ninja is just giving a goddamn dialogue clinic. Every word out of his mouth is just so fucking cool.
It's like one of my Japanese animes.
Yes, it is, Otacon. It is exactly like that, and will only become more so like your Japanese animes as this series goes on. Seriously, people treat this like it's a dumb line, and sure, maybe it's a bit weird to vocalize in what to him is a life or death situation, but I mean, don't we all think of anime at the end? The ninja wants to fight Snake. He's clearly from Snake's past, and he just wants to fight him to the death. Snake's just like, you know what? It, let's fight to the death. And so they go at it hand to hand. It is so ridiculously badass. God, I love this game. As the fight goes on, Snake begins to realize that he might know who he's fighting.
That's it. I remember that punch.
But he says it's impossible because that person died at Zanzibar. Now, people who played Metal Gear 2 were like, oh shit! But people like me and pretty much all American players in '98 were like, okay, what went down in Zanzibar? But joke's on us, Kojima didn't mean that Zanzibar, you idiot. He meant a fake one that he made up instead, obviously. So the fight ends and the ninja loses his mind again. Snake immediately calls the colonel to confirm that that ninja was indeed Gray Fox. Campbell's like, nah, he's dead, I wouldn't worry about it. And then Naomi's like, nah, he's not dead at all. Foxhound's Dr. Clark, Naomi's predecessor, turned him into a kick-ass cyborg ninja.
That's the sickest thing I ever heard.
Hell yeah, it is. But the doctor also experimented on his essentially reanimated corpse for 4 years.
That's the sickest thing I ever heard.
Yeah, Dr. Clark. It's all good though, they got blown up in a lab accident. Naomi claims Fox was supposed to have died in the same explosion that killed Dr. Clark. This is information Naomi had the entire time, by the way. Snake says he's not even sure if Fox knew that he was Fox. He was just sort of hyper-focused on Snake. He then tells Naomi that he'd rather not kill him. She's weird about this entire conversation, but she almost seems mad that Snake isn't all hot and ready to kill Fox. But all of that can wait. Let's meet Metal Gear's engineer, Hal Emmerich. He calls himself Otacon, by the way. I kind of already mentioned that. That stands for Otaku Convention. That's the name he gave himself. That's what he went with. Otacon actually hurt himself a little bit getting away from the ninja, and they have some really, really clunky dialogue about it. Seriously, just listen to this.
Are you hurt?
I'm okay. I just twisted my ankle a little bit trying to get away.
Well, if that's all, it's nothing to worry about. I want to ask you something.
It's just so clunky and weird, I love it. But for now, Snake wants answers. What's the whole deal with Metal Gear? Well, Otacon tells him, hey, no big deal. I designed Metal Gear to shoot down missiles. It's only for defense purposes. Snake obviously has a few follow-up questions. However, he quickly realizes after telling Otacon they plan to launch a nuke that he isn't lying at all. Otacon really didn't know that the giant mecha he designed was intended to be used for its offensive capabilities. In Otacon's defense, he says the armaments, which include a railgun, were designed separately from Rex's body. It also shoots lasers out of its... well, you'll see. But really the key takeaway here is that it has a railgun. Otacon also says a new type of nuclear warhead may be being used on Rex. Oh yeah, the whole thing is called Rex, by the way. It looks like a little dinosaur. It's really cute, you'll see. So Otacon is distraught. To him, Metal Gear was going to be his way to help mankind, and now he feels he's following in his father and grandfather's cursed nuclear footsteps. You see, his grandfather worked on the Manhattan Project, and his father was born on the day the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. In trying to break the cycle, Otacon has actually come full circle, and is now directly dealing with nuclear weapons himself. By the way, we'll get into this in later videos, but he's really not kidding when he says his family is cursed. So Snake literally tells him to stop crying and please help him deal with the nuclear Gundam he built. Otacon tells him the control room is underground and past the comms tower. He's got to link back up with Meryl for that PAL card, so he gives her a buzz. They only talk briefly before Meryl is spotted and her connection cuts out.
Oh no! Damn, they've spotted me!
Wait, is that music?
Wasn't that some kind of music?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Otacon. Wait, how did he hear that? I wonder if that's some kind of foreshadowing. Nah. At this point, Snake doesn't know what to do with a person he rescued not immediately dying in front of him, so he just sort of tells Otacon to stay out of the way. Luckily, he has his own stealth camo. But now, Snake has to find Meryl and find a way to contact her safely. Don't worry, Otacon's plan is to just corner her in the women's bathroom. You know, like a creep. He came up with that idea a little too fast.
She had such a cute way of walking. She kind of wiggles her behind.
You were really looking.
But hey, when he's right though, because that's exactly what Snake does. By the way, this is the other opportunity to see Meryl in her underwear if you were wondering. You literally have to follow her so quickly to the women's room that she doesn't have time to put on pants. Bravo, Kojima. First things first, Snake immediately starts hitting on her. Waste of time though, because apparently she's had mental conditioning that destroyed her interest in men. But I don't know how true that is because she's definitely into Snake too. But this isn't the time to be thirsty. We have to do something about Metal Gear.
So there's something you like about me, huh?
Yeah, you've got a great butt.
Oh, I see. First it's my eyes, now it's my butt. What's next?
Damn, Snake just can't turn the Riz off.
I've never fought for anyone but myself. I've got no purpose in life, no ultimate goal.
Come on.
It's only when I'm cheating death on the battlefield. The only time I feel truly alive.
Snake, buddy, you're scaring off the hose. Go back to talking about her butt. Jokes aside, this conversation is actually the first time we really see how Snake feels about battle and about himself. Meryl views war and serving as something noble. She idolized Foxhound because to her, the men like Roy Campbell and Snake were heroes. Snake, however, doesn't see himself as a hero. To him, fighting is ugly, but it's the only thing he has. The only thing he really knows how to do. This is going to come up heavy during analysis later, but this is the crux of who Snake is as a character for much of this game. He's got no goals, no higher purpose, just a man dragged into doing something he's good at. And Meryl is kind of having an identity crisis. She wanted to become a soldier because her father was one, and she thought it would make her feel closer to him. However, now she feels like she's just conformed to some other person's idea of who she's supposed to be. Now she wants to see what she can really do for herself. After a genuinely compelling scene plays out in this woman's restroom, it's time to get a move on. Meryl only has one PAL key when there should be 3. Strange, but we gotta keep moving for now. They have to make their way through the commander's room to an underground tunnel since the land route is blocked. Well, let's get going then. Hey, wait a minute.
What happened to the music?
I was about to say that, Snake. Man, these fourth wall breaks better stop before I... See, we broke the game with all the nonsense. Shortly after leaving the bathroom, Meryl starts to act...
Hurry, make love to me.
Strange. But Campbell has worse news. Meryl is being controlled by Psycho Mantis. Remember him with that sick trench? Well, don't worry. Snake is an absolute professional, so we know exactly what to do. Remember how Baker talked about mental insulation to protect from Mantis? Well, it's time to give Meryl nature's psychic insulation. A good old-fashioned concussion. Or, I mean, you could, toss a stun grenade, I guess. With Snake's perfect counter to the Meryl possession offensive, Mantis reveals himself. No trench coat in sight, I'm sorry to report. Snake is not completely foreign to paranormal shit going on, but Psycho Mantis is from a whole ass other franchise. He's floating, for example, that's pretty much up to 11. At this point, famously, Psycho Mantis is just going to ignore the fourth wall for the next 15 minutes. First, he talks about how you've played the game up to this point, and he really emphasizes traps.
You are extremely careful of traps.
There's only a few traps in the game up to this point, low single digits, and yet a huge part of Mantis's analysis of Snake revolves around traps. He'll also comment on how many deaths you've had, how many alerts you've had, and how often you've saved. There's several combinations he could say about all these things. Speaking of saves, next he'll dive into Snake's memory, and by that, I mean the memory card. He's going to comment on other Konami games you have, like Suikoden or Castlevania.
You like Castlevania, don't you?
There's only a few you can check for in English, sadly. Japan got the real better end of the deal on that one. In Japan, Kojima himself even joins in on the fourth wall breaking if you played his other PlayStation games. That's right, Kojima thanks us for our support. Happy to help, boss. Mantis also decides to show the power of the DualShock controller. He actually uses the vibration to make it move. In all my years playing games, I've never seen anyone use hardware like this game did. It was so incredible. And then, just because the fight starts, that doesn't mean the fourth wall break are over. Mantis, true to his word, will read your every thought and dodge your attacks. There's a trick though. You gotta swap your controller ports. Mantis can't read the second port, allowing you to fight him normally. There's also the backup strat where if you die a couple times, Campbell will suggest you destroy the statues of Mantis in the corners of the room. Which, by the way, what even is this room? Who is the commander? Commander of what exactly? Did Mantis bring these statues with him? I have so many questions about this room. You can also technically beat him without swapping ports or destroying the statues. I know this because I've done it. Check out that video sometime, it was a nightmare. Once you land the final blow on Mantis, Naomi will actually call you and be kind of a dick to Snake about the Meryl thing. She's all like, why did you save her? I thought you were a huge piece of shit. And Snake is like, well, I don't really want to see a woman die in front of me. Naomi's like, LOL, since when do you care about anyone's death? And Campbell kind of has to go to bat for Snake and defend him.
It's true that Snake has killed a lot of people, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have a heart.
Thank you for that.
Now it's time for our first death monologue of the game. Kind of interesting, I think, that 4 bosses in and we're just now seeing the first significant death. Snake, in classic fashion, tells Meryl to shut up and let the man monologue, and Mantis proceeds to rant about hating humanity and the idea of procreation. Dude's got some demons. He even killed his own dad because he read his mind and found out that he hated him. Jesus. He compares himself to Snake a few times during this monologue as well. He also goes out of his way to tell Snake that he has a large place in Meryl's heart, which is kind of crazy. They technically just met 15 minutes ago. Sort of a red flag there, but hey, Mantis was just trying to be a good wingman in his last moments. Speaking of his last moments, he tells Snake to put his mask back on so he can die by himself. Turns out, the gas mask kept people's thoughts out, so not just cool, it has a function. The rest of his look though is just a weird goth choice. Finally, before he dies, Mantis opens the way onward for Snake and Meryl.
This is the first time I've ever used my power to help someone. It's strange. It feels kind of nice.
Be gone! Before they depart, Meryl apologizes for letting Mantis control her. Snake just tells her to take any doubt she has and use it to make her stronger. Meryl then asks if Mantis is right about him. He's completely alone.
Other people just complicate my life. I don't like to get involved.
You're a sad, lonely man.
Come on, let's go.
Now they have to travel through my least favorite area of the game. These goddamn dogs are so frustrating. Meryl runs ahead and they give her no trouble, but Snake, who is a dog musher by the way, just gets owned by these wolves on sight. It's ridiculous. There's actually a trick to get the dogs off your back. You have to have the little one pee on the cardboard box. Do you know how you get him to do that? You have to hit Meryl and then hide inside of one. Yeah, 2 situations now that we solved a problem by punching Meryl. This is, that's a pattern now.
What are you doing?
Anyway, at the end of this section, Meryl has us freeze. There's Claymore mines. Uh-oh. Well, don't worry, we'll just crawl over
Leave it to me.
Oh, well, okay then. Yeah, so since Mantis dove in her mine, she accidentally saw the exact layout of mines. Good thing, otherwise I'd have no idea where to... Oh. Unfortunately for Meryl, Mantis didn't give her just a few more seconds of foresight as she's instantly shot by Sniper Wolf. Now, neither Snake nor Meryl are dumb. They know she's bait. Meryl tells Snake to kill her and apologizes for slowing him down, which she promised she wouldn't do. To be fair, she actually slowed us down twice. We've been with her for like 25 minutes, and already twice now she's been used as some sort of weapon against Snake. Snake takes a quick call from Campbell and Naomi.
Must be Sniper Wolf, Foxhound's best shooter.
Yeah, safe bet. Another banger from the support staff. So, to battle Sniper Wolf, we need a PSG-1 sniper rifle. Surely it's like the Nikita missile launcher, right? We'll just find it nearby.
Would that it were so simple.
Yeah, remember where we fought Revolver Ocelot all the way back to the beginning of the game? Yeah, we have to go all the way back to that room, grab the PSG-1, then go all the way back to fight Sniper Wolf. However, beating her is straightforward once you're on even terms. It's a little clunky. If she shoots you, she makes her camera go a little screwy, but it's no big deal. Meryl is already gone though, just some bloodstains remain. Once you reach the other side of the walkway, Snake will be ambushed by a few guards and, surprise, Wolf. She's actually totally fine. Takes more than several shots to the face to take down Sniper Wolf, I guess. Snake, alright, he kinda gets a little playful with her here.
A lady sniper, huh?
Jesus, the guy's like Austin Powers. Anyway, Wolf tells him that he's her special prey and she won't rest until she kills him.
I've left my mark on you. I won't forget it. Until I kill you. You're all I think about.
Anyone else getting kinda hot? Right? No? No? Okay. A guard knocks out Snake and he awakens mid-conversation strapped to a revolving metal bed. Anyone else getting kinda hot? Okay, alright, I'll stop. Liquid Snake is here with Ocelot and Wolf. Liquid calls Snake the man who stole his birthright, and himself the man Snake stole everything good from. The brothers of light and dark. They want Snake's DNA too, saying it will help the genome soldiers, but what they really need is Big Boss's DNA still for the cure. Bad news though. During his little monologue, Liquid gets a phone call from Raven. The US isn't giving in to their demands. Looks like they're gonna launch that nuke. But Liquid says it feels strange, that the government must feel it has some sort of advantage over them. Liquid leaves the torture.
Torture? This is an interrogation.
Right. He leaves the interrogation to Ocelot.
Ocelot, don't screw up like you did with the chief.
Wait, is that what that vision was about?
We've also got to find out what killed Baker, an octopus.
Wait, like decoy octopus? He died off screen? Anyway, after telling Snake that Meryl is still alive, Wolf leaves too. Now it's just Ocelot and Snake. Ocelot refers to Snake as Carrier Boy at one point and asks him if there's any other copies of the Metal Gear Rex data Baker gave him. He also wants to know what the trick is with the PAL key. There's one key and there's supposed to be 3. Baker had said there was a trick. Snake has none of these answers. He probably knows the least of anyone in the game at this point. A point proven when Snake asks Ocelot if they really do have a new type of nuke, and Ocelot just says,
"Why don't you go ask Campbell for the full story?"
What? So now Ocelot tortures Snake by electrocuting him. You have to mash the action button like crazy to survive it. I still swear this section has given me carpal tunnel in my old age. Ocelot actually breaks the 4th wall here, the last major time that anyone does.
Don't even think about using auto fire, or I'll know.
But the thing is, he won't know. You can totally use turbo and he'll never notice.
When your life reaches 0, the game is over. There are no continues, my friend.
Unfortunately, that part he's right about. If you die here, you actually really do have to reload a save. He'll even make a comment if it's been a while since you've saved. Ocelot also doesn't actually interrogate Snake. Aside from asking those questions about the disc and the key that he really doesn't seem to care that much about the answers to, he never actually asked anything during the torture. Ocelot says you can submit to the torture at any time, but Meryl will die if you do. Metal Gear Solid actually has 2 endings. If you endure the torture, you get one ending. If you submit, you get the other. Only the last 20 minutes or so of the game changes depending on the ending. We'll address both endings when the time comes. Whether you submit or endure, after the torture sequence you'll be taken to a cell. In this cell is the rotting corpse of the DARPA chief, but like way more decomposed than he should be for having died an hour or so ago. Also, his blood seems to be drained. Weird. Snake calls Campbell and finally tells him to cut the shit and admit that he knew more about Metal Gear's capabilities and was keeping it from him. Campbell sadly admits that it's true. He did know there was a new type of weapon involved. Snake is pissed.
Hell with you. I'm sorry.
Campbell says not even the president knows about Metal Gear Rex, and they couldn't risk a leak because he's signing the START 3 treaty tomorrow. So, the START 3 treaty was a real-life arms control treaty between Russia and the United States. It was never ultimately signed in real life, but when the game was being developed in 1997, the groundwork was being laid by Bill Clinton and Boris Yeltsin. This signing is also the reason for the launch deadline. Obviously, a massive nuclear strike would be an issue for a nuclear arms treaty. Liquid used that to put the pressure on. Snake asks why they don't just give them Big Boss's body. Campbell says they can't do it, but is clearly not telling him the real reason.
Do you see how easy it is for me to lie to you? I do it every day. Anyway, looks like everything worked out for the best.
With the terrorists having both codes and Snake having no info about the other 2 PAL keys, he's gonna have to destroy Metal Gear. For now though, Snake wants Naomi to talk him through the pain for some reason. She's been nothing but kind of a dick to him the entire game, but whatever. Snake brings up family, then says he doesn't have any before correcting himself.
No. Wait. There was a man who said he was my father.
Where is he?
Dead. By my own hand. Big Boss.
What? Big Boss? I had no idea.
Yep, at some point during the Zanzibar incident, Big Boss told Snake he was his dad. This is the shared trauma that Snake had with Mantis. They both killed their father. This is a large part of the reason Snake left Foxhound and ended up as a hermit in Alaska. Naomi is shocked but doesn't push him much on it.
How?
who wanted it. Besides, some people just need killing.
That's patricide.
She says her only family was a brother who wasn't even related to her. He's now dead. Then they talk about friends. Snake considers Roy Campbell his friend, which Campbell is of course touched he still feels that way.
You're still calling me friend?
Snake then shares there was one other, Frank Yeager, Gray Fox himself. Naomi is floored by this. He killed him, or so he thought. How could he do that? Snake says they were just professionals on separate sides. Nothing personal. Didn't change how he felt about him.
War is no reason to end a friendship.
Obviously, Naomi doesn't understand this at all and says that it's Snake's genes. He's predisposed to violence. Ugh, then they talk about genes for a bit.
You really like talking about genes, Naomi.
Boy, does she. She says she got into genetics to find out about her heritage because she didn't know her parents. Okay, that's legit. Maybe in this universe, Naomi developed 23andMe or something. So after they're done, Snake calls Otacon. He's his only hope right now. Otacon asks where he is, and he says he's in a cell with a big torture machine nearby. Which, I'd always assumed they brought with them, but it looks like a real son of a gun to try and move and set up. Was it already here? Is this like a generic torture rack that Ocelot would already be familiar with?
Okay, here we go.
Otacon is now gonna come help somehow. Great. I'm sure the stress is totally gone from Snake at this point. If you didn't submit, you're tortured again. This time when you come back, the guard, who has a cold because some woman stole his clothes earlier, will run off to the bathroom. That's Johnny Sasaki, by the way. Remember him? While Johnny's in the bathroom, Otacon shows up. He doesn't really have any way to help, but he brings you some food and ketchup? Okay. He also gives you Wolf's handkerchief, and Snake is like, why do you have this? And Otacon's like, I don't know. Wolf's awesome, though. Snake politely...
Wake up, you idiot.
Reminds Otacon that she, shot Meryl. He then responds with this.
Well, that's all I can do.
What do you mean by that? He doesn't even acknowledge Snake mentioning Meryl or Wolf at all. He just hits us with the Patrick Star.
Well, I've done all I can do.
So he leaves, and now the guard's coming back. Lay down on the floor, use the ketchup, and boom, the ketchup will begin to pool around you just like blood. When Johnny comes back, he'll be shocked to see you injured and will rush in where you can then whip his ass real quick. Thankfully, this time he gets to keep his clothes. If, for whatever reason, you can't beat Johnny, maybe just out of pity, you can run into the torture room where he will... Not again. Experience his own style of torture. If you fail the ketchup, or just like being a rebel, you can also hide under the bed and wait for Johnny to come back. The end result is the same. There's also technically a third way. If you fail to escape off the ketchup in bed, eventually, after more torture sessions from Ocelot, Gray Fox will come and bust you out.
Otacon? So you're here to get me out?
He doesn't say anything, and it doesn't change anything, but it's a nice little extra scene.
The ninja?
No matter how you do it, once you've grabbed your clothes, you're home free, and you get to traverse all the way back to the comms tower where you fought Wolf again. We're starting from essentially the exact same place the PSG-1 was, so really this is the same trip verbatim we just took before the boss fight. However, to spice things up, there's a possibility Ocelot put a bomb in your items. Might want to throw that out. If you do let it kill you, you get to hear Ocelot laughing on the death screen. It's worth doing at least once. Thankfully, when you hit the Wolf Caves this time, if you equip Wolf's handkerchief, they'll not only leave you alone, but love you. Still can't pet them, but I much prefer this treatment. When you finally get to the communications tower, Snake has kind of a long flashback about Meryl. I mean, gameplay-wise, this was like 15 minutes ago, so I don't really know if we needed to see this whole scene again, but, it's kind of the whole presentation of the thing. Snake calls Campbell and apologizes.
Colonel, I'm sorry.
He's talking about Meryl, but I think he's also talking about their argument back in the cell. Campbell tells Snake not to blame himself. She knew what she was getting into. Snake disagrees with him, though. He tells Campbell she never actually wanted to be a soldier. She just thought it was something she had to do, to bring her closer to her dead father. Campbell is a little upset to hear this. Snake feels like he pushed her too hard when she wasn't ready for real combat. This is when Miller chimes in. Miller was eavesdropping, I guess? A little sus, if you ask me. Are people still saying sus? I don't know what people on the internet do. Miller says you can't blame yourself for the past because it's a path that leads to madness. Mei Ling then chimes in to support Snake as well. And then finally, Naomi pops on. Jeez, I'm glad they sprung for the codec premium with the conference call feature for this mission. Naomi, once again, asks some catty questions about how Snake feels about Meryl. Campbell tells Snake that Naomi must have investigator genes. You see, Naomi's half-Japanese grandfather rose to assistant secretary of the FBI under Edgar Hoover during the 50s. He went undercover to bring down the mob.
Where?
New York, I think.
Naomi, I thought you didn't have any family.
Well, I researched it after I became an adult.
Uh-huh. After that, Naomi ends the call. Now, we can actually go into the comms tower and it should be a nice and peaceful... Nah, just kidding. The game knows you've had a lot of dialogue to sit through, so we're all action for a bit. When you enter the comm tower, you trigger an alert and guards pour in after you. Don't forget to grab the rope at the bottom of the stairs or you'll really regret it in a few minutes. Now, Snake has to fight his way up this tower. It's such a cool set piece and much more exciting than the other PlayStation 1 game where you climb an assload of stairs. Less problematic too. Yo, I don't think she can just say that, right? Anyway, the game fakes you out a few floors up with a door. Sorry, it's frozen shut. Snake won't be getting through there right now. Unless, of course, he knows speedrun tricks. Then he can just go right through. But this ain't a speedrun. Once Snake reaches the top of the communications tower, Liquid is waiting for him. Time for a duel on the tower, huh? Well, yes. Except Liquid brought a Russian attack helicopter to a gunfight. Yeah, it's that Hind D from the beginning of the game. Chekhov's Hind D, if you will.
Remember?
So, Liquid has the advantage here, and he's gonna light up the whole roof. Snake's trapped. Don't worry though. I know you grabbed the rope, so we can just... Wait, you didn't grab the rope? I specifically told you to... Since we definitely grabbed the rope, we get to rappel down the side of the tower, the entire time being fired at by Liquid. This is just a full stop crazy sequence and one hell of a set piece. Now onto the next tower. Right when you walk in, you'll find a Stinger missile launcher just sitting in the hallway. You know, the perfect spot for missile launcher storage. This'll surely come in handy for that attack helicopter hovering around. How convenient for them to give us the weapon we need just sitting there. Remember when we had to backtrack to the beginning of the f***ing game for the sniper rifle? Anyway, Snake is still stuck. The stairs are busted, he can't go down. The elevator isn't working either. But Otacon shows up and he came up on the elevator? What the hell's going on? Otacon saw Snake repel from the chopper and honestly, he's a fan.
You're incredible. Like a movie hero or something.
Snake, obviously, isn't feeling much like a movie hero at all.
In the movies, the hero always saves the girl.
Speaking of, Otacon followed him all the way up here to ask him something.
Do you think love can bloom, even on a battlefield?
Now, I'm gonna spend some time analyzing this later, but Snake gives him a very honest answer here.
Yeah, I do. I think at any time, any place, people can fall in love with each other. But if you love someone, you have to be able to protect them.
Otacon is surprised and comforted by this answer. This is a really genuine moment. It's highlighting where Snake's head is at, it's highlighting his compassion, and more importantly, it's highlighting the way that Otacon is having an effect on him. Again, we'll talk about this more later, but I really love this scene, and it might be one of my favorites in the entire series. Snake then asks Otacon if he's okay, and not in the awkward, clunky way he did back in the lab. He's asking from a place of genuine concern.
Don't worry. If I do this, it doesn't matter. I just pretend like I'm not here, and then I'm not scared.
So, Otacon's gonna work on getting the elevator fixed, and Snake is gonna go face Liquid. Snake asks him why he keeps calling him brother.
Who the hell are you? I'm you! I'm your shadow!
Snake obviously doesn't really know what he means by that.
What?
But Liquid delivers an all-time cold line to punctuate this.
Ask the father that you killed! I'll send you to hell to meet him!
Don't worry though, Snake goes bar for bar with him after beating him.
See you in hell, Liquid. That takes care of the cremation.
In the time Snake was doing that, the elevator got fixed. Not by Otacon though, he said the elevator just started working again. More excellent assistance from Otacon. Otacon takes one more minute to talk about how awesome and cool Snake is.
Helicopter? That's incredible, Snake.
He really is just like us. With that, Snake sets off on the elevator, but the weight limit goes off.
Huh?
About this time, Otacon calls back again. You see, he actually had 4 other stealth suits, but when he went back to get one for Snake, they were missing. Curious. Also, Otacon says that the elevator before seemed like it was being held, not broken. Curiouser. Finally, he says that he also set off the weight alarm, yet the weight limit for the elevator is over 600 pounds. It would take 5 people to... Wait, then that means...
Look out, Snake! The guys who stole my stealth prototypes are in there with you!
I'm afraid this cursed Otacon portrait is right. They're in the elevator with Snake. This is technically a reference to Metal Gear 2, kind of. They're easy to take down. Now, Snake is finally out of the tower and just needs to make it across this snowfield without being shot by anyone. Oh no! Otacon calls, excited at the fact that Wolf is here.
It's her!
He then begs Snake not to kill her because she's a good person. Snake is rightfully stunned by this.
Are you insane?
Then, Wolf hops onto the codec, which is not even something I was aware you could do. Otacon essentially pleads with both of them not to go through with the fight. Kind of like a kid standing between his fighting parents. Needless to say, he fails. Par for the course, Wolf drops yet another cold as ice line before the fight.
Well, I'm going to send you a love letter, my dear. Do you know what that is? It's a bullet straight from my gun to your heart.
What do you even say to that?
Snake,
my God.
No!
So Snake has to fight Sniper Wolf in a snowstorm. It takes a true legend like Snake to out-snipe an expert like Wolf in the middle of a blizzard like this. Thankfully, if you're not that kind of legend, you can just shoot Nikita missiles at her from behind this hill. Everyone has their kryptonite. Wolf's is being shot in the face with rockets. Regardless of how you end this fight, get your tissues ready. A dying Wolf begins to share her story with Snake. She is Kurdish and was born on a battlefield. Growing up, she had no purpose or real safety in her life until she met Saladin, aka Big Boss. Big Boss took her in, where she became a sniper and worked to fight against all the things that had oppressed her, her family, and her friends. She joined with Liquid out of revenge, something she feels has shamed her. She doesn't deserve to be called a wolf. She's instead just a dog. Snake instead disagrees.
They call mercenaries like us dogs of war. It's true. We're all for sale at some price or another. But you're different. Untamed. Solitary. You're no dog. You're a wolf.
Sniper Wolf calls him Saladin here. It's not clear if she's hallucinating Snake as Big Boss, acknowledging that Snake reminds her of Big Boss, or maybe some of both. Snake thanks her for not killing Meryl. Wolf said that she doesn't kill for sport and Meryl was never her target. Wolf also says she thinks that all this time she was waiting for someone to kill her. All the death she'd caused had not brought her any of the peace that she was looking for.
Rest easy. You'll die as the proud wolf you are.
As Snake is raising his gun, Otacon arrives. Collapsing, he tells Wolf that he loves her. She asks for her gun and Otacon brings it over.
Okay, hero. Set me free.
Snake returns Wolf's handkerchief to its rightful owner. A distraught Otacon begs Snake to tell him what she was fighting for, what he's fighting for, and what Otacon should be fighting for.
If we make it through this, I'll tell you.
Okay.
Again, I'll go over this scene more later, but it really is special. It's also the first video game scene I can remember that got an actual, honest, emotional response out of me. And I still do to this day. Now, Snake has to head to the... Oh, yeah, hold on. Disc change. Now Snake has to head to the underground base. First, he has to go through the blast furnace, which sounds awesome, but it may just be the least eventful room in the entire game. I mean, you're in here for like 10 seconds. Snake has a couple of really long cargo elevator rides in front of him. On the first one, he has to fight a few dudes, light work. On the second, he gets a call from Master Miller. Master says Naomi was lying about her grandfather being in the FBI. Not only was J. Edgar Hoover a racist who would never have let a Japanese man get so high in the org, but those mob sting operations didn't happen until the 60s and they weren't in New York. Miller thinks she's a spy because of the weird inconsistencies. After their talk, Snake finds himself in the domain of Vulcan Raven. Haven't seen him in a while. He says some cryptic nonsense and also does a weird freeze move on Snake.
I can't move.
Raven never does this in the fight, but cool trick, I guess. He also tells Snake they're like cousins because he's Inuit and he senses Japanese blood in Snake.
Blood from the east flows within your veins.
First we're hearing about that, but alright, fine. Raven also brings up the World Eskimo Indian Olympics, since Snake is also an Alaskan. Kind of funny that these two dudes do have a lot in common.
Yeah, I know it. Must be a real threat in the muck-duck eating contest.
This is meant as a slam, but Raven actually just says,
yes, you are right.
He's also good at the ear pull. Here's a quick clip of what the ear pull looks like. Not exactly what you were picturing, I bet, but it's still brutal as hell. Okay, let's see the muck-duck eating contest too. It's whale blubber. Anyway, Raven fights Snake lugging around a 250-pound aircraft Vulcan cannon, complete with the ammo drum on his back. Here's a real-life picture of two dudes transporting a belt of ammo to give you an idea of how f***ing huge his setup is. But just shoot him with some missiles. Weird, he has the same weakness as Wolf. After Snake beats him, he's kinda chill about it. He's just happy to have had a good fight. He tells Snake that he and Liquid are not of this world. Cryptic. He also tells Snake that the DARPA chief that he saw die was actually Decoy Octopus in disguise. So that's where he's been. Also explains why the real DARPA chief was dead in your cell. Snake asks the correct follow-up question. Why did you have him do that?
That is the end of my hint. You must solve the rest of the riddle yourself.
Then, the Ravens eat him. And this was his best case scenario for his death. He's stoked about it. After the boss fight, Snake has time for a quick call. Master wants to talk about Naomi, except this time Campbell hears Master bring it up. Thankfully, Naomi is taking a nap. What an interesting time for a nap. What if we needed her for... What exactly does she do again? Anyway, Miller has bad news. Naomi Hunter isn't really Naomi Hunter. She's definitely up to something. Maybe even working with the terrorists themselves. Miller says she needs to be arrested immediately and interrogated. Campbell is very upset by this. It's inferred by both Snake and Miller that Naomi knows things that make this very bad news, and Campbell isn't talking about it. Campbell also says they need her for the mission. So Snake is, of course, pissed at Campbell again, but Campbell says he's gonna look into it.
I don't have any time left for you.
Now we can finally head into Rex's lair. This would actually be a bigger deal if we hadn't literally seen Rex in one of the first cutscenes of the game, but whatever, it's just a climb to the control room with multiple interruptions.
Snake, it's me.
You see, he's hacking into Baker's personal files for info.
Are you a hacker?
Yep, that describes me pretty well.
The first thing he learns is that Rex fires the new type of nuclear warhead from its railgun. Because of this, it's technically not a missile because it doesn't use fuel.
And that's not even the scariest thing about this weapon.
Oh, I can't wait to hear this.
It's a stealth weapon.
You mean it won't show up on radar?
Yeah.
Snake calls it the ultimate weapon, and he's not wrong. This thing would avoid all sorts of nuclear regulations and certainly be a political nightmare while the country is trying to sign treaties. And Colonel knew about all of it. All the hard data on the test exercise they did with Rex is on the optical disc that Ocelot took. Speaking of Ocelot, when Snake reaches the control room, Liquid and Ocelot are there. They're ready to launch, and Liquid wants to move the launch to Lop Nor, China. Why? Well, Lop Nor is a lake in China. It's a nuclear test site, so an attack there could potentially be covered up. But it would prove they're serious, and would put this incident on an international scale. The United States would be forced to share information about Metal Gear, and when other countries hear about it, they'll come to Liquid with interest in Rex and its capabilities. The US would be forced to give in to Liquid's demands, lest they start selling out Rex to the highest bidder. Liquid's demands, if you forgot, were Big Boss's DNA, but he also now wants $1 billion, which seems kinda low given the stakes, but hey, $1 billion in 2005 was more like $1.7 billion, and in 98 when the game came out it was closer to $2 billion, which, I don't know, still seems small given the stakes. Am I wrong here? Anyway, Liquid now wants to add a demand, the Fox Dye vaccine. Now, we have no idea what that means, but Ocelot mentions that Fox Dye is what killed Baker and Octopus, and if you recall, Octopus was posing as the DARPA chief, so that must be what the heart attacks were from. Liquid and Ocelot don't mention much more about Fox Dye, only to share that Mantis and Wolf seem unaffected. They also talk about Ocelot's friend from Spetsnaz, Sergei Gerlukovich. They got the hind D from him, and he's ready to team up since he wants Metal Gear to help restore Russia's glory. Well, Liquid doesn't really give a shit about that, but Gerlukovich has an army of 1,000 soldiers ready to go, and Liquid's plan is for them to come right here to Shadow Moses. They've got plenty of spare warheads, a mech that can launch invisible nukes, and they're plenty fortified. But Liquid doesn't want to call it Shadow Moses anymore.
From today, call this place Outer Heaven. Big Boss's dream.
Big Boss intended for it to be a nation of soldiers, ready to do whatever work needs done as long as the price was right. Liquid's interpretation is a little different. We'll elaborate on that in a minute. Snake decides to take a quick phone call like 10 feet away from the bad guys, but luckily it's Otacon. He has good news. He's figured out how to use the PAL key. If Rex is activated, the PAL key will deactivate it. Likewise, if Rex isn't active, the PAL key will activate it, and the keys can only be used once. But Snake only has one of the keys. Or does he? The card key changes shape when exposed to extreme temperatures, so this one key is actually all 3 keys. Pretty cool actually, that's a pretty cool twist. Well, Snake is spotted by Ocelot, who shoots the key out of his hands. At this point there's 2 options for what happens to that card. If you've had more than 11 alerts throughout the game, then the key will be in one of 7 set locations lying in the drainage ditch at the bottom of the layer. If you have had less than 11 alerts, well congrats, you get to kill a rat. Yeah, a rat eats the f***ing card. So now Snake has to input the card in the control room 3 times. Once at room temperature, once cold from Raven's boss room, and once hot from the blast furnace. Each time going all the way to the top of Rex's lair, then going all the way back to the next area. I mean, at least it's not the worst backtracking we've done in this game. During the backtracking, Miller calls Snake. Remember Fox Die? Well, now Miller's bringing it up. Miller's friend in the Pentagon leaked to him that the DIA had developed Fox Die, a viral weapon that kills specific people. The victims suffer what looks like a heart attack. Sounds familiar, we were right. Miller thinks Naomi is involved. Wonder if there was a time when Naomi injected us with anything. Oh no, she totally did! Snake calls Campbell to tell him, but they've already arrested Naomi. They found out she was sending coded messages to the base. Looks like she's a traitor, alright. Miller is very concerned about if there's a Fox Die vaccine or not, and if they have it lying around. Snake is too focused on the mission though. He's going to leave the interrogation to Campbell. As Snake continues his key quest, he gets another Kodak call, this time from Naomi herself. She confirms what Campbell had said, but also says not everything was a lie. She truly did get into genetics to learn about herself. She doesn't even know her real name or how old she actually is. Naomi was an orphan in Rhodesia. She was found and taken in by a soldier she now views as an older brother, Frank Yeager. Yep, Gray Fox. Fox and Naomi were eventually found by Big Boss and brought to America. However, Fox went back to Africa with Big Boss, which is of course where Snake crippled the former and killed the latter. This would be why she's sort of a passive-aggressive dick to Snake the entire game. She joined Foxhound specifically to get her revenge on Snake, although now she's having some doubts about the man he is. Naomi also confirms that it was Fox who killed Dr. Clark, and she helped cover it up. Snake asks if Fox is here to kill him too, but Naomi thinks he truly just wants to fight him.
Make me feel alive again.
Naomi also explains Fox Die to Snake in a very descriptive way.
It infects the macrophages in the victim's
Fox Die
body.
contains
They
smart
respond by becoming
enzymes
creative and
active
using the
through protein
macrophages. They begin
engineering.
creating
A
TNF
peptide which
epsilon.
causes
The TNF
cells
epsilon
to
is
die.
carried
The
along the
heart
bloodstream
cells
to the
suffer a
heart,
shock
where they
can
attach to
undergo
the
an
TNF
extreme
receptor to heart
apoptosis.
cells. Then, the victim dies.
Yeah, long story short, it targets a victim based on specific DNA and then makes them have a heart attack. That's as simple as I can make it. Snake assumes Naomi had used it to kill him, but she says that being injected with Fox Die wasn't even her idea. It was always intended to be a part of the operation.
Snake,
Before she can elaborate, Campbell takes her back into custody.
Snake!
Naomi! Snake, I can't allow Naomi to make any more unauthorized transmissions. What?
A furious Snake has no choice but to continue the mission.
You double-crossed me.
Finally, Snake can scan the last card key and deactivate...
Detonation code activated.
No, why?
Wait, what do you mean activated? Yep, that's right, Snake just fell into a massive trap. And who's calling to gloat about it? Master Miller. You see, Ocelot killed the DARPA chief on accident. They were never able to get his code. However, they knew that if Snake thought they had it, then he'd be forced to deactivate Metal Gear using the PAL key. This is why Decoy Octopus pretended to be the chief. So, Miller's a terrorist? No, of course not. Snake sees through that instantly. Who is this imposter? Don't worry though, Campbell has some intel quite literally at the last second.
Snake, that's not Master Miller.
Yeah, no shit, Campbell. Miller is dead. He's been dead for 3 days. Whoever Snake's been talking to, the call is coming from inside the base. Wait, wouldn't they have realized that way sooner? How did it take this long? Who cares? Miller's liquid. Look at those flowing locks. I'm not even that mad at him about it. So he traps Snake in this gas-filled room. A quick call to Otacon gets this sorted out though. He unlocks the door. Otacon is really making himself useful on Disc 2. We love a helpful king. So now it's time to confront Liquid, but first, he delivers the most incredible line of dialogue in the entire game.
Snake! Did you like my sunglasses?
Then, he taunts Snake for being a government pawn without even realizing it. You see, Snake's whole mission, the hostages, destroying Metal Gear, all of it, it was a big lie. Snake's actual mission was to infiltrate Shadow Moses and spread Fox Die, to wipe out the terrorists so that Rex could be retrieved undamaged. However, Liquid's informant learned that before the mission, Naomi altered Fox Die's programming. No one knows why or how. It's also not super clear if Naomi is just operating on pure revenge or has a grander plan or vision. It's irrelevant to Liquid at this point. He added the Fox Die vaccine to his demands, although he does point out that it may not matter. While Fox Die killed Decoy Octopus and Baker within minutes, Liquid, Ocelot, and Snake himself haven't had any effects at all of the virus. Liquid says if Snake's alive, he's not worried because they have identical genetic codes. Yep, as Snake has started to suspect throughout the game, they are indeed twins. More than that, actually.
You got all the old man's dominant genes. I got the flawed recessive genes. Everything was done so that you would be the greatest of his children. The only reason I exist is so they could create you.
I was the favorite, huh?
Okay, so I need to pause here. The game really simplifies a pretty complex scientific concept to make a point. A recessive trait isn't inherently worse or better than a dominant one. For example, having 5 fingers on each hand is a recessive trait. Recessive versus dominant is just about transmission. So, moving forward with this video, I'm going to instead focus on what I think Kojima was trying to express, and not necessarily the exact verbiage he used. Liquid is said to be the inferior clone of the two. That's the real message here. So, since Liquid is the inferior clone, it is his mission in life to surpass Big Boss. Since he can't kill Big Boss anymore since Snake stole that from him, he's more than happy to kill Snake in his place. Now, Snake has to fight Metal Gear. Halfway through the battle, as Liquid is about to crush Snake, the ninja shows up for an assist. Or, should we say Gray Fox?
A name from long ago. It sounds better than Deep Throat.
So it is you.
Yep, that's right. Gray Fox has been helping us the whole time. Which, by the way, I said I wanted to bring it up later. When he called us outside of Hal's lab, was he killing those soldiers while he talked on the codec with us? When did he have the time to make that call to warn us about the electric floor? So Fox came here so Snake could kill him. Snake says he can't die because Naomi needs him. He then drops a huge bombshell.
I'm the one who killed her parents. I was young then and couldn't bring myself to kill her too. I felt so bad that I decided to take her with me.
Wow, that's messed up.
He wants Snake to tell Naomi the truth for him. As for Fox, he's going to try and do some damage to Rex. However, Liquid gets him in a very tough spot pretty quickly. Fox manages to damage the radome, so Liquid is forced to open the cockpit.
Impressive! You are indeed worthy of the codename Fox!
The player is given the illusion of choice here. You get to witness Fox's final speech from the viewfinder of the Stinger launcher. Even if you are heartless enough to try and fire, Snake will refuse.
No, I can't do it.
Liquid then tosses him to the floor, ready to give the coup de grace, but not before one final message for Snake.
Snake, we're not tools of the government or anyone else. Fighting was the only thing I was good at. But at least I always fought for what I believed in.
And then, Fox is dead. Nothing left to make into another cyborg ninja this time. So, Snake has to put a hurt on Rex one more time. However, Snake loses consciousness as Rex explodes. When Snake wakes up, he's on top of Metal Gear. Liquid dragged him up here and also took his shirt off? Okay, okay. Snake asks what his endgame is. He wants a world where soldiers can thrive and don't have to answer to anyone. His version of outer heaven is basically to just throw the world into a constant state of conflict, a place where a soldier will never become irrelevant. A bit more warlordy than Big Boss's idea of a world where soldiers could choose for themselves. Liquid calls out Snake, saying that he of all people should understand this.
So why are you here then? Why do you continue to follow your orders while your superiors betray you? Why did you come here? Well, I'll tell you then. You enjoy all the killing. That's why. There's a killer inside you. You don't have to deny it. We were created to be that way.
Created?
Now Liquid is going to talk about genetics for like a solid 5 minutes.
2 fertilized eggs with exactly the same DNA. 20th century analog cloning and the super baby method. Genes, soldier genes. Dominant genes, human genome project. Recessive genes, soldier genes. Created artificially through the alignment of nucleotides to mimic our father's genes. In nature, family members don't mate with each other. Have you ever heard of the asymmetry theory? Selfish gene theory. Genes. That's why I'll follow what my genes tell me.
Yeah, don't worry, you don't need to take notes, I got you. So Snake and Liquid are not just twins and sons of Big Boss, they're clones of Big Boss.
Well, that's a twist.
In the 1970s, the L'Enfant Terrible project sought to create the perfect soldier. They chose for this model the best soldier in the world at that time, Big Boss. The clones were then genetically modified so that Solid Snake would be the superior clone.
You took everything from me before I was even born!
Decades later, scientists would isolate the so-called soldier genes of Big Boss and use those to create the Genome Army. Technically, they are also in many ways Snake's siblings, at least genetically speaking. However, the Genome Army is decaying at a genetic level, and that's why Liquid needs Big Boss's DNA. But there's no more time to chat. Not because of Fox died, but because Snake destroyed Metal Gear. Campbell tells Snake that the Secretary of Defense called for Shadow Moses to be nuked in order to cover up the entire thing. Campbell isn't going to let that happen. He tells Snake that the only reason that he agreed to this mission is because they sent Meryl to Shadow Moses. So he was essentially being blackmailed the entire game. In order to make up for the lies he was forced to tell Snake, he's going to essentially sacrifice his career in order to delay the strike. Unfortunately, before he can do anything, he's arrested by the slimiest f***ing dick in the whole series.
Roy Campbell has been relieved of duty.
Secretary of Defense Jim Houseman. All my homies hate Jim Houseman. Stupid idiot looking like Clint Eastwood Abraham Lincoln. Anyway, Houseman gloats about nuking the place to high hell. He has no problems killing everyone there, since the only person he cared about was the DARPA chief. You see, the chief was supposed to survive the entire thing and bring home the optical disc. That optical disc, by the way, is important enough that Houseman is willing to make a deal with Snake if he still had it. Unfortunately, Ocelot took the disc, so known dick Jim Houseman tells Snake to pound sand. He also dunks on both clones for being an embarrassment to the country. God, f*** this guy. Now, Snake and Liquid have to have a bare fist fight to the death, shirtless, on top of a destroyed Metal Gear, while Meryl is strapped to a bomb feet away, and B-2 bombers are on their way to nuke the entire facility. If you don't think that shit is rad as hell, then I don't know what the f*** is wrong with you. So, Snake beats Liquid, knocks him off Metal Gear to his death, and rushes to save Meryl. Now, remember back when I said there were 2 endings depending on whether you submit to the torture or not? Well, if you didn't submit to the torture, Snake will wake Meryl up and the two will have an emotional moment. She tells Snake she didn't submit either, and she endured the torture.
And things even worse than that.
But through it all, she stayed strong because she wanted to see Snake again. Snake lets Otacon know that Meryl is safe, who is very happy to hear it.
All right, you saved her, man.
Otacon tells Snake of an escape route and volunteers to stay behind to make sure the security on their route is clear. Snake tells him it's likely suicide since the nukes they're dropping are surface piercing. But Otacon persists. He wants to leave the past behind and fight for something. Getting Snake and Meryl out is enough to live for now. Snake thanks him, which makes Otacon very happy too.
Thanks? Well, that sounds nice.
Meryl asked about him too.
What about him? Where's Otacon?
Wait, where is who?
Otacon.
Who the f*** is Otacon? Anyway, they have to bail, which means no time for their love scene. They quickly make their way to a nearby jeep and put pedal to the metal. Unfortunately, it's never that simple.
Not yet, Snake! It's not over yet!
Liquid is not only alive, but he's well enough to chase after them with one hand on the wheel and the other on the strap. After holding Liquid off long enough, eventually both Jeeps will crash. Meryl and Snake are in a sticky situation, and Liquid still isn't dead. He approaches, ready to deliver the final blow to both Snake and Meryl, but... Liquid finally succumbs to Fox Die, which, of course, makes Snake realize that his time is going to come soon too. But Campbell calls Snake with good news. He got in touch with the president, and turns out that Jim Hausman had done this entire operation on his own, without any direction or discussion with the president. So now, Jim is arrested, the air raid is called off, and Campbell is back in charge. Campbell apologizes to Snake for all the lies and thanks him for saving Meryl. He also tells him about a snowmobile they picked up on a radar nearby. As far as the government is concerned, both of them are dead, so they don't need to worry about anyone bothering them again. Even if they did, Campbell backed up all of Mei Ling's mission data, which should be enough to stop anyone from coming after him, Snake, or Mei Ling herself. Snake makes sure Campbell has someone come take care of Otacon, and then the two say their final goodbyes, with Snake this time promising to pay him a visit soon. But Snake has one final question for Naomi.
Naomi, Liquid died from Fox Die too. What about me? When am I gonna go?
Naomi...
That's up to you.
Does not give him an answer.
Everybody dies when their time is up.
Yeah, so when's mine up?
It's up to you how you use the time left to you.
She essentially just says, hey man, don't worry about it. He does tell her though that Gray Fox loved her and that he died saving the world. Naomi says she thinks he can finally be at peace now instead of the ghost he'd been since Zanzibar. Naomi monologues about genetics as Snake and Meryl make their way to the snowmobile. She really kind of sums up what the game is about, which we'll address more in a minute. She says that she was wrong about genes. She didn't need to know her genes to know who she was as a person. Genes carry data. They give potential to the next generation, but they're nothing on their own. Naomi finally understands that you can live a life without a grand, predestined endpoint. Snake, similarly, tells Meryl he's only ever lived for himself, and that maybe it's time to live for others too. People like Meryl. They flirt a bit and Meryl gives him a bandana. That's not a euphemism, it's an actual bandana.
So, where to, Snake?
David. My name's David.
Okay, so where to, Dave?
And with that, they ride into the sunset. But wait, whatever happened to Ocelot? Well, after the credits, we hear a one-sided conversation Ocelot is having with...
Mr. President.
Yep, the president himself. He drops some real cliffhanger exposition. He tells him that Fox Die will activate in Snake soon. He also says that no one knew who he really was except the DARPA chief who was killed, so it was no accident. He's also got the optical disc, all according to plan. Ocelot also confirms that Liquid was wrong. Snake was actually the weaker twin. However, they are both inferior to the third, perfect clone of Big Boss, the president himself, Solidus. Yes, the president of the United States is a clone. If it sounds made up, I know. And with that, Metal Gear Solid is over. Well, there's actually the other ending. So back up to after the Liquid fight. If you did submit to the torture, then Meryl will be dead. Yeah, just straight up dead. David Hayter's rent must have been due before this short monologue here, because man, he really puts in some work.
Forgive me. Damn! I gave in to my fear. I gave in to my pain. I sold your life to save my own. I'm a loser. I'm not the hero you thought I was. I'm nothing. Meryl, I'm sorry. Forgive me.
Yeah, awesome, right? Well, Otacon rolls up and starts quoting Hemingway and comparing Meryl's death to Wolf's, which is a little different, but somehow this works. Otacon managed to help Snake snap out of it, and they escape together. Yeah, apparently he already unlocked the security in this ending, so... The rest of the ending is basically the same, just Otacon is there instead of Meryl. However, one massive piece of information we learned from this ending is that Campbell isn't Meryl's uncle.
Meryl was my daughter.
Yeah, kinda makes this ending even sadder. Before they leave, Snake has a similar epiphany about living for those other than himself. Otacon, though, is really changed by this experience. Instead of being a spectator in life, he's now gonna stand on his own feet. They also laugh about the fact that their names are Hal and Dave.
Oh, that's right. Hal. Hal and Dave. That's a good one.
Yeah, Kojima gave Snake a name just to make a 2001 reference.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Also, Otacon gives Snake his stealth camo because he says he doesn't need it anymore. And that's it. Interestingly, Ocelot doesn't mention Solidus or Snake being the lesser clone in the Otacon ending. As far as which ending is canon, well, later games get into that, so I'm not going to get into it here, but Meryl living is definitely the good ending. Now that we've gone over the plot in depth, let's really start looking at the big picture here. So, remember I mentioned earlier that Kojima was hesitant to create a new Metal Gear game because it had been so long since the last entry? He grappled with three options: reboot the series, remake an earlier game, or create a new sequel. His solution? Well, all of those. You see, Metal Gear Solid is not only a sequel to Metal Gear 2, it's in many ways a remake of Metal Gear 2. This, of course, makes it a very, very light reboot of the series as well. Metal Gear Solid takes place after Metal Gear 2, but starts the same way, with Solid Snake being brought out of retirement by Roy Campbell. It also mirrors many key plot points and gameplay elements from the previous game. Snake is once again aided by Master Miller over the radio, and teams up with the scientists who designed Metal Gear. Familiar elements like a female ally disguised as an enemy, a returning ninja character, and a climactic hand-to-hand fight with Grey Fox all feel like callbacks. Even major events like the Hind D boss battle echo those in Metal Gear 2. But it's not just a retread. Kojima used these echoes to build a bridge for American audiences who at the time were unable to truly play the original games. The parallels offer fans of Metal Gear 2 a sense of continuity, while the story and characters stand entirely on their own for newcomers. The only other example of something like this I've ever seen is Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2. It revisits the plot of its predecessor while still acting as a sequel and expanding the series. Even the gameplay reflects this duality. At its core, Metal Gear Solid retains the top-down stealth mechanics of its predecessors. Guards follow pre-programmed patterns, and players work through interconnected areas in a way that feels rooted in 2D design. This approach wasn't just about nostalgia, it was technical brilliance. The static isometric camera ensures smooth navigation and avoids the clunkiness that plagued many early 3D games. Kojima's team even used LEGO models during pre-production to experiment with level layouts and camera angles. This attention to detail gave Metal Gear Solid a visual polish and level design that outshined many contemporaries. The result? A game that feels as fresh and playable in 2025 as it did in 1998. The production value of Metal Gear Solid was, and still is, one of its defining features. Hideo Kojima's love for cinema is evident in every frame, every line of dialogue, and every meticulously crafted moment. At the time, few games could rival its cinematic storytelling. While JRPGs like Final Fantasy VII and Xenogears were pushing narrative boundaries in the late 90s, they leaned more into epic, novelistic storytelling. Metal Gear Solid took a different route. It wasn't Tolkien, it was Fleming. This was gaming's James Bond, with all the tension, intrigue, and flair of a blockbuster spy thriller. The cutscenes were revolutionary. They used dynamic camera angles, followed cinematic rules, and sometimes broke them for dramatic effect. It was also Kojima's love of film that influenced character design. For example, lovable double agent and spaghetti western enthusiast Revolver Ocelot was, rather appropriately, modeled after Lee Van Cleef. God, Lee Van Cleef was cool as f***. Great Primus song, too. Van Cleef was also in Escape from New York, acting opposite Snake Plissken. It all comes together. Kojima also had Hollywood in mind when designing Snake himself. His body was modeled after Jean-Claude Van Damme, which, hell yeah to that, and his face was modeled after Christopher Walken. Now, this one I don't see. I've looked at tons of concept and production art to try and contort my brain to see Christopher Walken like some sort of optical illusion puzzle, but I just can't. Maybe it's me. Are you guys seeing the Walken influence? Meanwhile, the voice acting was leagues ahead of most games of the era.
Hunted like dogs, day after day.
Where wooden performances and awkward translations were the norm. David Hayter's portrayal of Solid Snake is iconic for a reason. His performance was grounded, memorable, and entirely serious. A critical factor for a game with such bizarre elements. Without that gravitas, the game risked tipping into parody. David is very aware of Hot Dog Fontaine, by the way.
Yes, absolutely.
Wait a minute. You borrowed money from Hot Dog Fontaine?
Yeah, that made my year. Anyway, the rest of the cast matched Hayter's commitment, delivering performances that still resonate today. Many of these actors also remain active in the Metal Gear community, a testament to their connection with the material. Oh, also you might notice that aside from David Hayter and Psycho Mantis' voice actor, Doug Stone, all of the actors used pseudonyms for the first game. This is because back then, voice acting for games was relatively new, so a lot of people chose to use fake names when performing for games to avoid any potential conflict with their acting unions. Fun fact, in the demo, David Hayter actually does use a pseudonym, Sean Barker, which is really funny because that's his character's name in Guyver. Two other people also deserve special recognition here: translator Jeremy Blaustein and voice director Chris Zimmerman-Salter. Blaustein's translation retained the complexity and nuance of the original script while ensuring it was accessible to Western audiences. Zimmerman-Salter's direction brought the performances to life, blending theatricality and authenticity in a way that few games had managed before. If either one of them had fallen short in their role, I would not be making this video today. I guarantee that, and I would be remiss not to give them their flowers, so to speak. The narrative was delivered not just through cinematic cutscenes, but also through the codec system, which felt like a blend of radio drama and audiobook. These sequences provided backstory, character development, and even gameplay hints. While some players find the codec conversations lengthy, they're vital to the game's pacing and tone. They immerse players in the world and provide a depth of storytelling that would have been impossible through gameplay alone. Having everything fully voiced and performed well keeps it from feeling like it's tons of exposition. It's also, to Kojima's credit, paced well. He even manages to make multiple backtracking sessions in the game not feel like an obligation. Balance of gameplay and storytelling is key. Kojima didn't simply add a story to a game, he built a game around the story. Every element of Metal Gear Solid, from its gameplay, to its voice acting, to its cinematic presentation, serves the narrative. It's this synergy that elevated Metal Gear Solid into a masterpiece, laying the groundwork for the series' legacy as a pioneer in interactive storytelling. Metal Gear Solid is brimming with small details. These details help to create a more immersive experience. Take, for example, that section in the B2 basement near Hal's lab. Across the hall, there's an area filled with desks that were specifically designed to look individual enough from each other to seem real, even though technically you don't have to even go over there. These subtle touches are what would come to define the Metal Gear series. World building through meticulous attention to detail, even in spaces players might skip entirely. Some of these details go beyond atmosphere and actively reinforce the story. For instance, Snake's health bar grows after every boss fight. This is a common trope in video games, but here it's more than just a gameplay mechanic. It reflects Snake's journey as he shakes off the rust of retirement, symbolizing his gradual return to peak form. Even dialogue adapts to player performance. After the initial infiltration, Campbell might praise Snake, famously saying,
"Age hasn't slowed you down one bit."
But did you even know that if the player struggles in the docks, Campbell instead will say,
"That took a long time. I guess you're feeling a little rusty."
Don't worry, it's been a while, but it's all coming back to me.
This interplay between gameplay and narrative adds a layer of dynamic storytelling that feels personal and interactive. Some of this actually acts as subtle foreshadowing, like how rations freeze in cold environments. At first, this detail feels like just a little bit of realism, but it subtly primes the player for the POW key puzzle later, where Snake has to freeze and heat the key to progress. But even the quirky little fourth wall breaks throughout the game, such as Campbell reverting to the action button and having to check the back of the case for Meryl's number, actually prepares us for the Mantis fight later and keeps his encounter from feeling too strange or goofy. This all adds to a gameplay loop that was simple but refined. There's tons of items and equipment for Snake to find on Shadow Moses, for example, plenty of weapons. Weapons which, by the way, were based off of real-life weaponry. I always found this to be so cool. Like, Snake finds a SOCOM pistol early in the game and, well, the SOCOM is a real pistol. This is true for most weapons in the game. The PSG-1, for example, is a real-life rifle called the whole thing adds to the realism and cinematic feel of the game. Snake isn't wielding a hand cannon or a generic .45 pistol, he's using real-world weaponry. The big exception to this is the Nikita launcher. This weapon is entirely fictional and was actually named after the French film La Femme Nikita. But I think that's okay. If your story calls for a remote-controlled rocket launcher, sometimes you gotta make your own. Snake also has access to items like gas mask, thermal goggles, and yeah, of course, the famous cardboard box. However, as you get better at Metal Gear Solid, you end up using less and less of these. If you play perfectly, for example, you really only use your weapons against bosses. These boss battles, of course, are where the cinematic and thematic elements shine brightest. Each fight is a meticulously crafted set piece that highlights the personality and abilities of the antagonist. For example, Revolver Ocelot tests the player's precision in a tense gunfight with ricocheting bullets. Psycho Mantis famously breaks the fourth wall, reading the player's inputs and disrupting traditional gameplay expectations. And Sniper Wolf is really the only place in the game to feasibly use the sniper rifle. These battles aren't just obstacles or checkboxes to completing a run, they're integral to the narrative. Conversations with bosses reveal their motivations, backstories, and the broader Metal Gear lore. These small touches work in harmony to create a cohesive, cinematic experience, making Metal Gear Solid not just a game, but a fully realized world that set a new standard for interactive storytelling. Every one of these details, whether environmental, mechanical, or narrative, feeds into the overarching theme of the game. Hideo Kojima has said that every Metal Gear game can be encapsulated in a single word. For Metal Gear Solid, that word is gene. At its core, the game explores genetics, not just in the literal sense, but as a lens through which to examine the tension between nature and nurture. It asks profound questions about identity, free will, and whether we're bound by the circumstances of our birth or defined by the choices we make. This theme permeates every aspect of the game, touching on every major character and ultimately shaping Snake's journey from a tool of war to a man seeking a purpose beyond combat. At the heart of Metal Gear Solid lies the rivalry between Solid Snake and Liquid Snake, two clones of Big Boss who are locked in a conflict that epitomizes the theme of Gene. Genetically identical, yet vastly different in personality and outlook. Their battle is not just physical, but philosophical, a clash over identity, destiny, and the meaning of their shared heritage. Liquid's resentment defines his entire existence. Believing he was engineered as the inferior clone, he grows to despise both Big Boss and Solid Snake, seeking to surpass them both to prove his worth. This belief that his very DNA relegates him to a lesser status fuels his rage and shapes his obsession with power and domination. Snake, on the other hand, is blissfully unaware of the genetic tampering that shaped him. He views himself as a soldier, nothing more, nothing less. Unlike Liquid, Snake's ignorance allows him to avoid being consumed by bitterness. Yet, as the game progresses, Snake is forced to confront the same questions Liquid wrestled with his entire life. Am I nothing more than a tool? Am I destined to follow the path laid out by my genes? For all their differences, Snake and Liquid are strikingly similar. Both are products of war shaped by the battlefield. Snake admits that he only feels alive when he's fighting, a sentiment Liquid shares. Both men see combat as intrinsic to their identities, yet they respond to this realization in opposite ways. Liquid embraces it fully, reveling in his role as a warrior and seeking to create a world of perpetual conflict where he can thrive. Snake, however, begins to question his place in this cycle of violence, grappling with the possibility of a life beyond war. Liquid's anger at Big Boss further highlights their shared struggle. He views Big Boss as a symbol of the system that created him and seeks to surpass him as an act of defiance. Meanwhile, Snake, though disconnected from any familial attachment to Big Boss, is unknowingly following in his footsteps. Both men are trying, in their own ways, to escape the shadow of their father. Through Liquid, the game poses a haunting question to Snake and the player. What does it mean to be human in the face of manipulation and control? Liquid represents one possible answer: unwavering adherence to the idea that he is a tool of war, destined to fight and destroy. Snake's journey, in contrast, becomes one of finding a new answer, rejecting that destiny and forging his own path, not as a soldier, but as a person. Liquid's declaration that he's Snake's shadow is a moment of profound insight. He does represent the darkest parts of Snake's identity, the bloodlust, the nihilism, and the unrelenting drive to fight. Yet Snake's journey through the game is one of rejecting this shadow. Through his interaction with others, Snake begins to see that his life doesn't have to be dictated by the same forces that shaped Liquid's. The Foxhound members, also known as the Sons of Big Boss, each highlight the theme of nurture over nature. Ironically, none of them share Big Boss's genetics, except Liquid, yet they all revere Big Boss in different ways. Vulcan Raven, for instance, fought under Big Boss during Outer Heaven and remained loyal to his ideals. Ocelot's bond with Big Boss was personal and will be elaborated on more in future videos. Sniper Wolf found purpose in Big Boss after a tragic childhood as a Kurdish refugee, seeing him as the family she lacked. In stark contrast, Liquid, Big Boss's literal clone, despises him. This dynamic underscores how upbringing shapes identity just as powerfully as genetics. The Foxhound unit's backstories mirror Snake's internal conflict. Take Psycho Mantis, whose abusive upbringing and hatred for his father led him to kill him. Manipulated for his psychic abilities, Mantis rebelled against governments and embraced mass murder as his purpose. Mantis even sees Snake as worse than himself, accusing Snake of killing without reason, driven only by orders. Snake doesn't disagree. This is the very conflict he grapples with throughout the game. Similarly, Sniper Wolf's life was defined by tragedy. As a Kurdish child in Iraq, she endured a brutal upbringing until Big Boss gave her purpose, to become a soldier. From that moment, her rifle became her voice, a mirror to Snake's journey as a tool of war. Dr. Naomi Hunter is another key figure in the narrative. Naomi's life has been shaped by questions of identity. Orphaned as a child, she found family in her adopted brother, Gray Fox, as well as Big Boss himself. But this chosen family came with its own traumas, as Naomi's search for belonging led her to obsess over her own genetic origins. Her work in genetic engineering reflects this obsession. She seeks answers in DNA, believing that it holds the key to who we are and why we exist. Yet, despite her expertise, Naomi's longing for identity through genetics only leaves her with more questions. Naomi's creation of Fox Dye, a genetic weapon designed to kill specific individuals based on their DNA, is the game's most literal manifestation of its theme. Snake carries this weapon within him, a constant reminder of how his genetics have been weaponized. Yet Naomi's story is more than a scientific exploration of genetics. It's an emotional journey of reconciliation. Throughout the game, Naomi grapples with her desire for revenge against Snake, whom she blames for Gray Fox's suffering and Big Boss's death. But by the end, she begins to see beyond her obsession with genetics and vengeance. Naomi's journey parallels Snake's own. Their conversations throughout the game push both characters toward a shared understanding. Identity is forged in action, not biology. In her final message to Snake, she encourages him to live for the present rather than being defined by his past or his genetic code. This mirrors her own growth as she learns to accept life as it is rather than what she wished it could be. Meryl Silverberg's story also explores identity and choice. Like Snake, Meryl initially believed that her path as a soldier is predetermined by her lineage. As she believes she is the niece of Roy Campbell, Meryl views her role as a soldier not just as a career, but as an inevitability. Both Meryl and Snake are shaped by their circumstances, but their attitudes toward their roles in life could not be more different at the start of the game. Meryl enters the battlefield with a sense of purpose, while Snake has grown cynical and detached, viewing war as a necessary evil. Meryl's belief in the possibility of a better world challenges Snake's worldview. Her determination to find meaning in her actions, even in the face of overwhelming odds, stands in stark contrast to Snake's resignation. This difference is highlighted during their conversations, where Meryl often questions Snake's motives and challenges him to see the bigger picture. Yet, their similarities are undeniable. Both are trapped by the expectations placed on them, Snake by his genetic engineering and Meryl by her family legacy. Meryl's journey to find her own identity outside of being Campbell's niece mirrors Snake's struggle to define himself beyond being a clone of Big Boss. Meryl's capture and near-death experience at the hands of Sniper Wolf is a turning point for Snake's character. Even in the face of death, she clings to her idealism, encouraging Snake to keep fighting and not to lose hope. This moment profoundly affects Snake. Watching Meryl's unyielding spirit forces him to confront his own apathy. For perhaps the first time, Snake begins to see the value in fighting for something beyond survival. Meryl's journey demonstrates that lineage is not destiny. By the end of the game, she begins to realize that her worth is not tied to being a soldier, but to the choices she makes and the values she upholds. Ultimately, Meryl becomes a symbol of hope for Snake. Her idealism, bravery, and determination remind him that there is more to life than war. Her willingness to fight for something she believes in, even when it nearly cost her her life, shows Snake that purpose can be found not in blindly following orders, but in choosing a cause worth fighting for. Otacon represents another layer of the gene theme in Metal Gear Solid, though his struggle takes a different form. Unlike Snake, whose genetics were designed for war, Otacon grapples with the moral legacy of his family's contributions to destruction. His work on the Metal Gear project, though initially intended for peaceful applications, becomes a tool of mass violence, mirroring a cycle of harm that has plagued his lineage. Otacon's story is one of accountability. He chooses to take responsibility for his role in enabling the horrors of the Metal Gear program, refusing to hide behind excuses of ignorance or good intentions. This accountability sets him apart from others in the story, including Snake, who for much of the game avoids reflecting on his own role in perpetuating cycles of violence. Otacon's desire to break that cycle speaks to his growth as a character and to his influence on Snake. Rather than accept the inevitability of destruction as a result of his work, Otacon actively seeks to undo the harm he's caused. He joins Snake in opposing Metal Gear not just as an act of redemption, but as a conscious rejection of the idea that his life must be defined by his mistakes. This attitude begins to challenge Snake's own perspective. Otacon's refusal to let the past define him serves as a mirror to Snake's struggle with his own identity and destiny. His technical expertise, moral clarity, and unwavering commitment to stopping Metal Gear help guide Snake towards a goal greater than just completing the mission. Together, they form an unlikely but effective partnership, bound not by genetic similarity, but by a shared desire to make a difference in the world. One of the most unexpected and poignant aspects of Otacon's role is how he helps Snake confront the idea of love. For a man like Snake, love has always been a foreign concept. His life as a soldier has left little room for emotional connections, and his self-perception as a killer rather than a person has made the idea of love seem unattainable. Otacon's willingness to embrace vulnerability, his feelings for Sniper Wolf, even in the face of tragedy, strikes a chord with Snake. It shows him that even in a world of violence and conflict, love can exist, and it is something worth fighting for. This influence manifests in Snake's evolving relationship with Meryl. While Snake initially tries to keep her at arm's length, afraid to acknowledge his feelings, his bond with Otacon helps him see that emotional connection isn't a weakness, it's a strength, a reason to keep going even when the odds seem insurmountable. In many ways, Otacon embodies the hope that genetics and past mistakes don't have to define a person's future. Together, Otacon and Snake form not just a partnership, but a friendship built on mutual growth. Otacon's optimism, accountability, and belief in love serve as a guiding light for Snake, helping him begin the journey towards becoming something more than just a soldier. Finally, we move on to Gray Fox, one of the most complex and haunting characters in Metal Gear Solid. His relationship with Snake is deeply layered, shifting from friend to adversary and back again. Gray Fox's presence in Metal Gear Solid serves as a reflection of Snake's inner turmoil, forcing him to confront the flawed logic of his worldview. Snake and Gray Fox were comrades on the battlefield, bound by mutual respect and a shared understanding of what it meant to be a soldier. Even when Fox became Snake's enemy, Snake never stopped seeing him as a friend. This twisted dynamic underscores one of Snake's core beliefs. Soldiers, regardless of which side they're on, are merely tools of larger forces. Gray Fox's transformation into the cyborg ninja shatters this perception. No longer a mere pawn, Fox has become something else entirely, a man searching for redemption and autonomy after a lifetime of being used. His struggle to reclaim his humanity mirrors Snake's own journey, making their confrontations deeply personal. Gray Fox's final moments in Metal Gear Solid are among the game's most poignant and transformative for Snake. As Fox sacrifices himself to save Snake, he delivers a powerful speech that encapsulates the game's theme of Gene and the battle between destiny and free will.
We're not tools of the government or anyone else. Fighting was the only thing I was good at. But at least I always fought for what I believed in.
This declaration is a direct challenge to everything Snake has accepted about his life. Gray Fox acknowledges his past as a tool of war, much like Snake, but he rejects the idea that this defines him. In his final act, Fox chooses to fight, not because of orders or programming, but because of his own convictions. For Snake, this moment is the final nail in the coffin of his old worldview. Gray Fox's sacrifice forces him to see that he, too, has a choice. He doesn't have to be a pawn of the government or a slave to his DNA. He can fight for something greater, or choose to stop fighting altogether. Gray Fox's final act is not just a moment of redemption for himself, it's a gift to Snake. It gives him the clarity and courage to break free from the chains of his DNA, his programming, and the endless cycle of violence he's been caught in. All of these characters, each wrestling with their own battles of identity, legacy, and purpose, come together to not only underscore Metal Gear Solid's central theme of Gene, but also to illuminate Snake's arc throughout the game. As Snake confronts the truth of his origins and the struggles of those around him, he moves beyond being a tool defined by his DNA to a man capable of choosing his own path, proving that while genetics may influence us, it is our choices, relationships, and convictions that ultimately shape who we become. Kojima loved movies, and I think Metal Gear Solid was the first time in his life he got to fully channel that love. It's not just about the story, it's the presentation, the dynamic camera work, the structured scenes, the immersive voice acting, all combined to create something greater than the sum of their parts. This was gaming's first true cinematic blockbuster, paving the way not just for the entire stealth genre, but proving that video games could tell grounded, human stories alongside fantastical ones. Hit series like The Last of Us and God of War owe much to the trail Kojima blazed nearly 30 years ago with Metal Gear Solid. It's a game that's both of its time and timeless, just as relevant today as it was in 1998. It stands among the most important games ever made because one man had a vision that went beyond what was possible, striving instead for what could be, and because of the countless talented individuals who brought that vision to life. Metal Gear Solid remains a defining moment in the history of video games, the medium's first true cinematic blockbuster.